off. There we go. All right,
Perfect.
thank you.
Okay. Okay. So like I mentioned, the recording will be shared with everybody who registered. So if you need to jump off and take care of yourself, feel free to do so, and you will surely get a copy of the recording. Just some context setting. So my name's Deborah, and I'm the Executive Director with the National Association of Social Workers, California chapter. And we had actually co-created this space as in response to a call to action. And really what that call to action was about was that social work policy instructors really wanted and craved a space where they could connect, network, and share in resources and support one another. So born from that inspiration was the Social Work Policy Consortium. That said, what's been interesting is as we've gone through the last year and a half or so of this consortium, is that a lot of the spaces that we've that have culminated as a result of the consortium resonate broadly with social workers of, at any professional level, whether you're a student or in your early career, or perhaps, you work so purely in the micro space. All that to say, a lot of social workers are really activated to get involved in policy work and or advocacy work. And so we welcome any and all to join our consortium events. So please do let us know if you want to be added to our email group. We're happy to include any and all who are interested in hearing updates. You can just email contact@NASW-CA.org. In terms of logistics, make sure you type in the Q&A box if you have questions. We did have to convert this event to a webinar. Normally, we actually leave it in a Zoom meeting because we like to see folks' faces and have generative conversation. But we ended up having over 200 registrants for this event, which forced us to make it into a webinar. Unfortunately, there was a little bit of a logistical need. But that said, usually we have conversation in these open spaces, and certainly we welcome digital dialogue, and we want you to chat with us. And so feel free. And also, I do want to name and thank our steering committee members of the Social Work Policy Consortium. And if any of you all are interested in joining the steering committee, we are looking for new members to join us. And please do know that we actually co-craft these events and co-design them with the steering committee members, as well as the broader members of the consortium. I think that's all I have to say. I don't want to take up too much time. I'm going to hand it off to my wonderful colleagues, Dr. Manalo and Dr. Alenkin. And thank you both so much for being here. And Lucia, you can go ahead and stop sharing.
Thank you, Deborah. And thank you for that, for setting the context. And thank you for your leadership and with the NASW California chapter as the executive director, and also to your staff, Lucia, and everyone else that was involved in helping maintain the work that we're doing with this consortium. As Deborah mentioned, my name is Victor Manalo, and I am the president of the board of directors of the California chapter of NASW. And I am so excited to be here with all of you to share with you a little bit about my experience, and also to bring in my good friend, Dr. Nick Alenkin, to talk about his experience as a social worker, working with, for, and across local governments on behalf of our clients and our agencies and organizations. So I'm going to let Dr. Alenkin start his presentation, and then I will come on afterwards. And we also have, for those of you who are policy instructors that are here with us, we're going to be sharing some policy assignments that are geared towards the local level. So Nick has a couple, and I have a couple that I'm going to be able to share with you, and we'll also be sharing a link that has those assignments archived that you are free to use. And then we'll have some time at the end to take any questions or comments that you all have. So I'm really excited about this, and I see a few of my colleagues that are here with us as well. So I'm going to throw it over to my colleague, Dr. Nick Alenkin, who is currently working for the VA, but a long time lecturer and at Cal State LA. And he and I go way back, and farther back than we care to remember, I think, right, Nick? But we're still out here doing the work. So I'm so glad that you're here with us to share with the participants your experience in this area and in this space. So I will go ahead and throw it over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Manalo. I don't know, maybe it explains a little bit this white beard. I don't know why you don't have one. But,
I shave mine, that's why.
It's really an honor and pleasure to be here, Ms. Sun, and to all of you that organize and have developed this. I'm just really honored and humbled to be here to just share some, I look at this as tools in our toolbox, and whether we work in a micro level, I think everyone at some point in their career realizes that the macro systems and organizations and institutions really have such a bearing at all levels on the work we do. So I'm just really honored and grateful to be here. I do want to just take a quick second. I think it is to be mindful of what's happening globally and domestically. I do want to acknowledge, all of the mass violence that's happening in the Ukraine. I was hearing some heartbreaking stories from Ethiopia and Yemen, and there's just so many things that are happening internationally and domestically, locally, and so I think to just kind of give some space for that is important, particularly as social workers, because we're all geared towards activating and working towards social justice. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time. I apologize if it's too much to be presenting this in terms of a kind of a lecture format, but I have some PowerPoints, and as Dr. Manalo mentioned, an assignment that I'll review. And then there will be, Dr. Manalo will share he has much more intergovernmental experience than I do, and I'll let him talk about that. But then we'll have an opportunity for a discussion. So I hope everyone can see this. I mean, apologize for my backdrop here. It's got a lot of material on it. But so I'm going to be focusing on talking about local governance and why local governance is so important. We're going to talk about, I'm going to start at the county level in California. I apologize if you're coming from another state, but feel free to reach out to me. I can certainly talk about some of the similarities and differences in terms of county and city governments nationally. Talk about the subdivision of power, specifically looking at LA County and LA City as an example, and then talk about advocacy through an assignment that I have my students do that I think is really helpful in this framework. So I don't know if any of you remember Tip O'Neill, but he had a wonderful quote. And his quote was, "All politics is local." And I think that really gives us a context that whether we're thinking about politics in terms of a national level or international level, the places and spaces where people engage in really happens at a local level. So it's really critical and vital for us to learn local level politics, policy making, and the political systems and institutions that are in place. So just briefly as an overview, again, this is focusing on California. The California Constitution and government codes codify what counties are and what cities are. And this is important because as we look at specifically in Los Angeles, we're going to see that there's such a sharing of power in terms of what the state gives at the county level. And that power and influence directly impacts what happens at the city levels as well too. And this is across California. So this is not unique to LA County. The counties, by virtue of the state legislative powers, are basically in lieu of the states in many instances. So they have vested powers to do what is necessary to provide for health and welfare of people within the county's borders, and in that sense, also play a critical role in terms of what happens locally in the cities. So here's, as we all know, California is such an expansive space. There are 58 counties in California, with Los Angeles being the most populous. But in terms of geography, San Bernardino County is the largest in terms of geography. Counties lack broad powers of self-government that California cities have. Most importantly, in terms of revenue authority, the city municipalities have much more say in terms of generation of revenue, and we're talking about taxes here that affect us all, than the counties do. However, the state legislature, as I mentioned, gives vested authority to the counties. And the state can also take back some of those vested authorities and powers to the counties when it deems necessary. So the counties, in many essence, act as and function as a state in many ways. And unlike what exists at the federal and state levels in terms of separation of powers, the most important in terms of political capital and in terms of legislative and executive authority, and in some instances, judicial authority, are the Board of Supervisors that house the county governmental structures. So in Los Angeles County, we have 5 Board of Supervisors that are largely in charge of roughly 18 million people in the county of Los Angeles. So they wield a lot of power, a lot of power. And that's important to remember as we look at the city in a second. LA County is the most populous county in the country. Again, about 18 million residents at this point. We are the 3rd largest economy in the world. So in terms of looking at the production of goods and manufacturing and the distribution of goods and the economic revenue that's generated, LA County ranks 3rd in the entire world in terms of GPD. So as we all know, unfortunately, with money comes power, and with power comes money. So the county board and folks in the county governmental structure wield a lot of power. The County Board of Supervisors are responsible for 8 service planning areas within Los Angeles County, to kind of confuse things a little bit more. So each of these service planning areas have their own set of rules and regulations that adhere to in terms of the county. And these 8 service planning areas house the social welfare institutions and social service delivery institutions and organizations throughout LA County. So it's expansive. We have all female Board of Supervisors, which is very historic. This is the first time that this has happened in the history of the Board of Supervisors. There has been some recent controversy. I won't go into that, but we currently have Hilda Solis, Holly Mitchell, Sheila Kuehl, Janice Hahn, and Catherine Barger, who are in charge and are the board supervisors. The board was created in 1852 to kind of give you some sense of the historical context of the Board of Supervisors as well, too. So in terms of the city of Los Angeles is the 2nd largest municipality in the country with approximately 4 million residents. There are 87 other cities in the county of Los Angeles. And this is not unique to Los Angeles County. Some cities are what are called unincorporated cities, such as Santa Monica, Beverly Hills, Culver City, West Hollywood, et cetera, et cetera. These unincorporated cities have their own set aside governmental structures and systems and service delivery in place, just to kind of confuse everybody. So often when I talk to students about engaging with local government, sometimes they come across these issues. They try to connect with somebody, for example, in Santa Monica, in the city of Santa Monica, and they find it might be a little bit difficult because the structures are set up differently than it might be in terms of the city of Los Angeles. So that's also important to know as well, too, that in terms of local municipalities and governments, unincorporated cities have their own vested powers and structures. They still adhere to some of the legislative authorities of the county, but they have created their own social welfare institutions and organizations and have their own tie in to the federal and state government for expenditure of monies that they receive as well too. LA City is governed by a mayor and a 15-person city council who are elected from geographic districts. The city also elects a city attorney and a city controller. This is a sense of within the county of Los Angeles, within the city of Los Angeles, the city council districts. And as you can see here, again, wide swath of geographic area. And each of these city councils have their own, again, ways of which political philosophies and social welfare ideologies and service delivery as well too, just to kind of confuse everything. Okay, here are some links that I included, and just some my contacts as well too. So that's just an overview of the city and county structures. And let me just go over this assignment that I've created, and then I will hand it off to Dr. Manalo here. So what I have students do, that I utilize this assignment in my social policy analysis advocacy course, and also in my community organizing course, to really have them understand and learn the ways in which local governance works. I asked them to look at committee meetings within the Los Angeles City Council. And these committees are really important. As most of us know, a lot of the political and legislative work happens in committees that exists at the state level and also at the federal level. And it's very much the same at the local level as well too. The committees are the structures that are created by the city charter that are meant to facilitate and to develop legislation around social issues that constituents face within the cities and the city districts. So there are 18 committees. I asked students to select one of the 18 committees, and this structure is going to be likely the same in wherever your geographic area is in terms of local city council governance and the development of committees to focus on certain social issues. So there's a wide range of committees in LA City Council: homelessness and poverty, public safety, water, et cetera, et cetera. So I have students select from one of these 18 committees. Once they have selected a committee, they attend a meeting. I ask them to attend the meetings because I think it's really important for them to have that firsthand primary experience of attending the meeting. And I found actually with the pandemic that with Zoom and with video meetings that the city council does, they have started going back to in-person meetings, but I found that there was greater access in terms of students being able to attend meetings and also see what the procedural processes are like. So I have them attend the meeting. I ask them to comment on the procedural processes and why they feel these processes are important. I ask them to look at agenda items that are presented and whether these were resolved within the meeting and their thoughts about that. I ask them about action steps. Action steps are really important when it comes not only to local governance, but at the state and federal levels as well too. Committees, we often see many times that legislation and proposed legislation gets stuck within a committee and can get stuck for years. You know, one of the statistics that I think is surprising is that, you know, less than about 2% of all bills or legislation that's passed, that's authored, I'm sorry, gets passed. So very few instances do we have where there isn't some committee that touches a piece of legislation. And that's due to our democratic process, obviously. So I asked them to think about and look at what action steps there were and to comment on that. I asked them to speak at the meetings, and I asked them to comment on what their opportunity was like in terms of speaking and what they felt in terms of whether they had a connection to the city council, to their elected members there. And then just an overall final thoughts and a reflective experience. I have found that students really enjoy this assignment. It allows them to not only see local governance, but to actually be involved in a social issue and a social problem that they are concerned with. And I have them as a takeaway focus on their own geographic city districts as a way to connect for them how often we talk about how social issues for one person, how we extend that to the macro level and make and raise consciousness for everyone in terms of social problems and social issues. Having a seat at the table of the city council at the local level is really important. So I think the gist of what I want the students to get is that the real problems that they experience on a day-to-day basis, these real problems get translated into legislation. And it's that legislation that then gets translated to practice that we do in the field. So I want really students to really connect to that and feel the importance of that. So I will stop there, and I believe we're going to have a question and answer session. So I'll stop there and turn it over to Dr. Manalo.
Thank you, Dr. Alenkin. If you wouldn't mind putting me back on as the host, because I cannot start my video screen, although that might be a good thing. But, we'll let the participants decide. Here we go. Okay, there I am. Great. Thank you so much, Nick, for your presentation. I think that just as in all levels of government, the structure of the government and the way that we can access that decision-making structure is very important for our students to understand. So that's why I like the assignment that Nick was sharing with you, because it really is is more of it's a very non-threatening way to get involved, especially for undergraduate social work students, but even for graduate social work students, because for many of us, our interaction with government is very limited. And if you haven't done it before, especially if you haven't been to a city council meeting before, or when you walk in and you see the dais of the council people sitting, it can be pretty intimidating to stand up and to speak in a chamber in front of the dais. So this is a good way to kind of introduce students to the process. So thank you, Nick, for sharing that. And I think that my contribution to this, for all of you who are instructors, and also for all of you who are students, I know there are a number of students here joining us today, as well as social work professionals who are practitioners working in the field already. I think the thing that I add and I contribute to this discussion is the fact that I was on the city council. I was an elected official for 12 years in my city. So my view from the inside, I think, is a good companion to Nick's presentation, which is kind of from the outside. So you can see how government works on both sides, and the opportunities that you have also from the inside point of view. So yes, I was an elected official for 12 years, and I tell people that I am a recovering elected official. So I'm recovering back to my social work roots, and always looking for ways to incorporate what I've learned over my 12 years, even more, because I sat on a commission, and I continue to be involved in my own city here in Artesia, which is in southeast part of Los Angeles County. I'm currently the chair of the Planning Commission, so I'm still involved in local government. And I think what Nick alluded to earlier is that I think is very important for you and for our social work students and all social workers to understand that local government is where the action is at, and there's so much action going on in your local government that you're not aware of, which is why the assignment that Nick was talking about is really good, because if students and others just go attend a council meeting where you live, or the council meeting where your agency where you work at, where just to look at the agenda and see what they're talking about, what's on their action agenda, and what they're talking about and announcing and debating at council meetings can be very informative for you in terms of understanding the priorities of a particular city government at that point in time. So I definitely think that that's a great way to get active and involved. But the other beautiful thing about getting involved in your local government is that it's very easily accessible. It is in your community. It's in your neighborhood. If you live, of course, I'm referring to LA County here, which has 88 cities, which is a large number of cities for a county. But for those of you that live in a city in LA County, your city hall is most likely very close to where you live. My city hall, I'm in a small city. So my city hall, I could walk to my city hall. So it's just it doesn't take any more effort than walking or riding your bike or driving a short distance to get to your local government. You don't have to worry about making a trip to Sacramento, which is the state capital of California, or to your state capital if you're far away, or you don't have to worry about these issues going on in Washington D.C. and trying to access your congressperson who is in D.C. most of the time, and not very often actually within the district. So there's kind of this practical aspect of getting involved in local government for social workers that I think is important to understand. The other thing too that I took away from my time on local government is that the responsibilities and the jurisdiction of local government of your cities, for example, the city where you live in, has broad responsibilities for things that matter to you every single day. So if I could just ask you to think about where you live or where you work, the city or community where you live or where you work. So just take a moment to think about the physical part of where you live, the physical community, the physical neighborhood where you live or where you work, okay? And think about the quality of the streets, the sidewalks, the infrastructure, the street lighting, the whether there are whether the properties are kept up. Those, in my 12 years on the council, those are very important issues to people that live in communities and neighborhoods, right? They want the streets to look good. They want them to be, repaired. They want them to be resurfaced every few years so that there are no cracks or potholes coming up when we have rain. They want people to take care of their properties and their, cut their grass on a regular basis and, keep their houses and their properties looking good because, when you have people coming to visit you, you want them to see a nice neighborhood, clean, well kept. City governments, your city government is responsible for those things. Your city government is responsible for the quality of the streets, the quality of the sidewalks, the trees that are in the parkway, and the street lights. Those infrastructure issues also relate to other things that people are concerned about in their own communities, such as safety. Many of my students have been talking about the fact that they live in areas where there's a lot of speeding. Cars seem to be going at a much quicker pace, even through our neighborhoods, trying to avoid traffic perhaps on larger streets. And so taking shortcuts through residential neighborhoods or, those kind of issues are controlled by the city, right? Cities, for example, can put in speed bumps. Cities can put in, can patrol, right? With their law enforcement, they can patrol streets that seem to be having problems with speeding. And cities can also reconfigure their streets to slow down traffic and to make it safer for pedestrians. So, for example, when I was the mayor in my city, we embarked on a project to cut down the number of lanes on the main street of our city, to cut back the number of lanes from 4 lanes, 2 lanes each way, which is, you know, if you just think about it, when you get in your car, if you're on a street where there are 2 lanes going one way or 2 lanes going the other way, or even some streets around here that I travel where there are 3 lanes going each way, and it's not a freeway or a highway, you tend to want to go faster because there are more lanes, right? So so in order to slow the speed down, what we did in our downtown is we removed 2 lanes. So we turned it into 1 lane going each way. And then with the lane that we took away, we widened the sidewalks so that people would feel, because that's our downtown business district. And we thought, okay, people will have a chance to, you know, they'll feel safer because they're walking around on a sidewalk that's a little wider, and you're a little bit further away from the traffic, and the traffic is going slower now because it's now cutting down. As you get towards our downtown, it's cutting down from 2 lanes to 1 lane, so the traffic automatically begins to slow down. So that's something that is that cities have responsibility for and in doing in their cities. As it relates to public safety, right? There's been a lot of talk over the last couple of years, especially since the killing of George Floyd, about the relationship between law enforcement and the communities and cities that they patrol. Well, in most of our cities, that is the responsibility of the city government. And as a matter of fact, in many cities, the police and law enforcement is part of the city's budget. So the city controls the budget of the police department or the law enforcement, and the police chief is appointed by the city council. So if you are concerned about public safety and the relationship of law enforcement to the people to your neighbors and your community, then you need to be able to understand how to access local government to have some impact there. And those, I'm just scratching the surface here, colleagues, on what local government does. We could talk about trash. We can talk about cities are responsible for picking up your trash, right? God forbid, 1 week your trash doesn't get removed from the curb. Many people complain. That has to be done regularly, right? Street sweeping, right? Cities do that. If your streets aren't being swept, that's your city's responsibility. Green space, parks, playgrounds, right? Here in Los Angeles County, we're very park poor, but cities can set aside land for more park space if they have that opportunity within their cities. As a matter of fact, in my city, we are doing that. We took a big piece of land that was part of a residence. The owner sold it. We bought it. The city bought it, purchased it, and we're going to turn that into a local park. So, green space, parks and rec programs, right? Many cities have park and rec programs for kids, adults, families. Some cities even provide senior services. They have a senior center. Those types of things. Housing and affordability, oh my goodness, what a huge issue that is in many urban areas throughout the country, including Los Angeles, of course. Cities, actually, in the state of California, there is nothing that prevents a city from enacting rent control. A city council right now, if a majority of the city council members were to vote in favor of putting rent control in their city, they could do it right now. And that's something that many people are not aware of. That's peculiar to state law in California. So, you know, if you're not in California, certainly you want to check with you know, what the laws are in your particular state. But here in California, there is no, any city can enact rent control by vote of the city council. But there are also issues that cities have responsibility for in terms of zoning, right? Many of you are familiar with this concept in cities, that you see that there are specific areas where in the city where you can build single family houses. There are only certain parts of the city where you can build apartments. There are only certain parts of the city where you can allow businesses and retail establishments, or industrial or factory uses, right? Cities have control over that. And there was a state law that passed a number of years ago in California that mandated that local governments identify areas in their city to build shelters for people who are unsheltered. And so if you were to organize and to contact your, you know, get active and engaged in your local government with your city council, you might be able to facilitate the city's freeing up some land or opportunity for shelters to be built for people who are unhoused and unsheltered. And of course, the pricing of housing is a big thing, and cities can incentivize when a developer comes in and wants to build housing. Cities in their negotiations can incentivize developers to build housing that is affordable, that is workforce affordable housing for people. Because governments doesn't build housing. We have private developers, and there are some nonprofit developers that do housing development, but cities have the ability to incentivize developers to build the type of housing that we need that will be affordable for people. So, and I even mentioned transportation. Public transportation is a local issue. Whether or not you have bike lanes or bike paths, that's a city issue. And then also we've talked a lot here in Los Angeles County about food insecurity and food deserts. Cities have the opportunity and the ability to incentivize fresh food markets to come into their city, right? That can happen, but that happens with the will of the people, right? And so, so what I want to, I will jump to that into my assignments in a moment, but I just wanted to give you just that context for why it's so important for us to get engaged in local government. Because as Nick said, yes, counties, especially LA County, has a huge budget. We're talking about, you know, multi-billion-dollar budget in LA County to provide the safety net of health and welfare services that many of us as social workers are connected with in some way, either working for or working with these county departments and providing mental health, protective services, and all those sorts of things. That comes from the county. So not only at the county level do they have access to all this funding and resources, but your cities as well. So it's very important for us to have some, to be engaged at that level. And so these types of issues I always refer to in local government, we refer to these things as quality of life issues, right? And cities will say, and city council members will say that we on the city level are concerned about providing services to our constituents and our residents that will enhance the quality of life in our cities and our communities. And so the second reason I would say we need to get involved in our local cities is because, hey, we all want, and I've asked this, I'm not going to ask you all this because I know you all want this. We all want to live in neighborhoods that are clean, and where the properties are kept up and they look decent. We all want to live places where streets are fixed, sidewalks are fixed, where we can walk. There's enough street lighting where we can walk. We want to safely. We want to live in a place that's safe, that is free of crime, that we don't feel like when we're walking in the middle of the day or even in the early evening on a beautiful summer evening, where we feel safe, and we don't. We all want to live in those types of neighborhoods where there's green space, there are parks nearby, access to fresh food. The housing there's opportunity for us to own homes. So we all want those things for where we live, and I say, what kind of difference would that make for our clients if they lived in these types of communities? What type of a difference that would make on our clients' mental health if they lived in communities that had decent infrastructure, access to fresh food, access to transportation, good public schools, right? All of these things that we want for the communities where we live. So as social workers, if we're working in these communities with our clients that live in these communities where they have a lack of resources, and we also need to, as social workers, need to understand how to access local government so that we can encourage our clients to get active in their local governments. Because in their own communities, they can get engaged with their own local governments to get the type, to create the type of communities and neighborhoods that are full of resources, that are clean, that are safe, and that have access to public transportation and fresh food and all of those great things that we all want for the places where we live. So it's all about the quality of life. And from my vantage point of having spent 12 years on the city council, there's one thing that I can tell you for sure, and it is backed up by research and data, and that is nobody participates in local government. No one participates in local government. I was on city council for 12 years, gave out my business card. I don't know how many boxes of business cards I'd given out over those 12 years. Been actively engaged, going to different events in my city, ribbon cuttings, Chamber of Commerce meetings, local, and then when we have a council meeting where we're going to be talking about how we're going to spend our $12 million budget in my city, nobody shows up. But if we're going to build, and this has happened, if we're going to build a high-rise building because a mixed-use building because we want to provide more housing units in general, we want to incentivize some affordable housing units because we have a train station coming to our city. Some of you who are in Los Angeles may have heard about that. There's a train coming that's going to have a station here in my city. But build a high-rise building and everyone comes out to protest, right? And that's the one thing I learned, I think, about the fact, two things. One, people don't get involved. Two, when they do get involved, it's because they're mad about something and they want to prevent the council from doing something. So what I'm suggesting to all of you is this. That is not the way a democracy should work. And unfortunately, that's the way we've all been taught about how engaging with our government works. You engage with government only when there's something wrong and you're trying to prevent those corrupt government officials from doing something that you don't want to happen. And I submit to you that that is not the way that we as social workers should be engaging with our government. We shouldn't just be engaging with them when there's something wrong and we want to protest it. We should be engaging with them in a proactive way to actually create the communities that we want, to give local governments and petition our local governments to make the investments in our communities that our communities need, so desperately need, whether it's infrastructure, whether it's, you know, any of these other issues that I talked about. So we need to be more actively engaged and involved in what's going on in our city government, for sure, right? Because A, nobody shows up unless they're complaining, and B, because most of us don't know how it works and how to get engaged and involved. So I'll tell you that as social workers, we are the most uniquely prepared. We are uniquely prepared as social workers to engage in local government. You know why? Because of our value on relationships. Because of our value of relationships. Because relationships is how we do our business, right? As social workers, is through relationships. As a matter of fact, in the Code of Ethics, it says, social workers understand that relationships between and among people are an important vehicle for change. Important vehicle for change. Our relationships that we create as social workers are an important vehicle for change. So if you don't have relationships with people in your local government, then you are ignoring a very important vehicle for change in your communities. Okay, so that's my pitch. I think I've told other groups that that's our superpower, right? For those of you who are comic book fans, I think relationships are our superpower, and we should be using our relationships, because we all know how to do it, but we should be applying these relationships beyond our clients, beyond our supervisors and our coworkers and our agency. We should be applying these relationships to the community, because we all know that you can't help facilitate change of a client if you don't have a good relationship with a client. Well, what makes you think you can change a city council, a 5-member city council, and try to convince 3 of them to do something that you want them to do outside of a relationship? Think about that for a second. We should be applying our relationships in a way to get change on that level in our city government, right? So for example, now the big cities in Los Angeles, or the big cities across this nation, if you're from out of state, right? The big cities have more city council members, but here in my city there are 5. We have 5 city council members, and most cities here in Los Angeles County, outside of the bigger cities, only have 5 city council members, right? So it's not that difficult for us to suggest that you might spend some time figuring out who these 5 people are and try to create relationships with people that may be friendly to our social work agenda. Okay, so that's kind of where I'm going with my assignments that I put on the link, and I know that we're going to have the links available for all of you. The assignments that Dr. Alenkin talked about will be on there, and I've also put a couple of assignments on there. But my local policy assignments is just that, based on relationship building. So what I do in my assignments is I have students look up their local city council members their local county, their county representative. In fact, I do it across all government, but since we're focused on local government, yes, they have to identify not just their local government, they have to identify their state representatives and their federal representatives, their congressperson, their United States senator, right? And I have them compile all that information and put it in a spreadsheet for me, so that they know they have a whole bunch of people that represent them, not only in DC, not only in the state capital, not only in the county government, but also in the cities where they live, right? So now you have the spreadsheet of all these people. You have contact information, websites, and all that stuff. And then part of the assignment is, go onto the website of your, since we're talking about local government here, I'd say the assignment would be, look up the bios of your city council members. And what do you see? What do you find out? What can you learn about the people that represent you in your city? And more often than not, I have students will come back and say, oh, I know this person. His kid and my kid went to the same elementary school. Or we went to high school together. Or, his mom and my mom are friends, right? I mean, because these people in your local government that are elected these local government positions, they live in your city. They live in your community, right? So these more often than not, you'll already have a connection with them in some way. And even if you don't, guess what? You're social workers. You can find the connection, right? You can find find out that thing about your elected officials where you can build some rapport, right? You went to the same high school, maybe at different times, but you went to the same high school. I had a student came back the other day and said, hey, one of my elected officials went to Cal State LA and got her master's degree. She's a student at Cal State LA. That's a great place to start a conversation and to start that relationship with your local elected officials. And it's not that difficult to do. I know many students come to me and say, oh, can I do that? Absolutely, you can do that. Okay. Like I said, at the local level, it's much easier. There's and believe me, I've met a lot of them, local elected officials, and they're all easily accessible. They all many times will put cell phone numbers out there for the public to view, and if not, they can call city council or the city hall, and they can get access to that elected official. Or in the larger cities, you may have to access their staff. But in most cities, you can get access to that elected official, and so they put together that spreadsheet. They look at their bios. They try to see, and then I say, is there a council member, or is there someone from that list that you feel like, wow, I think I could have a conversation with that person. Then the next part of the assignment is, okay, make an appointment to meet with that person. Right. So I actually, in my assignment, and I'm not sure if I put it on, I was looking at it this morning, and I wasn't sure if that part of the assignment is on there, but I'll update it. But I also have my students make an appointment to meet with their local elected official. Again, which is not a stretch, because, again, we're talking about your city officials, and in most cities, those people are pretty fairly accessible to students, and especially nowadays with the opportunity to do it by cell phone or by Zoom, many elected officials are much happier to take the time to meet with people through these alternative venues. But there's nothing wrong with asking someone to go have a cup of coffee at the local, wherever it is you go for coffee. Right, in a neutral place, or even to go to City Hall to meet with them. So I have to do a lot of this, managing the anxiety of my students when they do this, because, as I mentioned before, if you haven't done it before, it can be very intimidating if you don't know what it's like. So I am always available to consult with any of you if you have any further questions, but a lot of what I do is dispel the myths of local government and elected officials, because, you know, many of us have a bias against elected officials in the first place, which prevents us from engaging in politics overall. And I think that's a big mistake for us as social workers, to let our biases, and we know this, to let our biases dictate whether or not we get involved in our local government, because we happen to think because through social media and the regular media that politics is corrupt, and that everyone that's in politics is corrupt, and it's certainly, in my estimation, is not the case. Are there corrupt people in elected official yes, there are. I'm not discounting that at all, but the opportunities that we have to engage our local government and to really make a difference in our communities outweighs that, the bad people that are in government. So anyway, those are my the assignments that I have. I also have another assignment on there, and then I'll wrap it up and open up for questions. The other assignment I have is one that I have for my graduate students, that is looking at developing a policy portfolio. So I have them identify a policy that they want to advocate for, whether it's on the local level or state level, and then I have them put together a policy portfolio which documents what they've done to try to advocate for that policy, right? And that can include everything from sending emails, making phone calls, making videos on social media, and putting it out to their followers, doing face-to-face visits and communication, all sorts of different lobbying techniques and things. And then they document it in a portfolio that they hand in at the end of the semester. I think all of the assignments really talk about how do we really get our students to engage, whether it's going to a meeting, whether it's, you know, checking out local committees and commissions at the local government level, scheduling opportunities to meet with elected officials or their staff, or all the way up to, you know, engaging on very specific policy issues. These are all different ways that you can get your students engaged. So I think I will wrap it up there for now, and we can open it up for questions and answers, if that's okay. Deborah, I don't know how you want to do this.
Yeah, I can jump in. Dr.
Okay.
Alenkin has been doing such a fabulous job responding. So yeah, I'll let you chime in first.
I just want to make a point, Dr. Manalo. I think the experience you have echoes what many of us perceive that the experience should be. That local governance is definitely about quality of life issues. Definitely. And those are the things that people get riled up about and get upset about, is quality of life issues. I think, and I've been responding to some of the questions, I proposed the part 2, so maybe we can talk about that. I think, and I'll give an example here. I think historical context and political context is also so greatly important. What do I mean by that? We are now in a re-election midterm cycle, and our elected officials are hungry for attention. They want to connect to their constituents. They want to connect to folks that may be undecided, quote unquote, or independent, quote unquote. And so right now, I think the political and historical context have aligned to allow for people. There's been a lot of questions about people get intimidated and how do we have students really actively participate. So I want to give an example. In the city of LA, we have a mayor's election happening. There have been multiple public mayoral candidate forums at multiple places. And I attended one earlier this week, and there was a group of folks that were clearly community organizers and agitators, in the words of Sal Alenkin. And it was very evident that they were going to take over this forum. And they did it in a way that even the folks that were on stage noticed what was going to happen. And I think for me, what I learned from that experience is, if we don't make an effort to attend events, town halls, and meetings, if we don't make an effort to reach out to our local elected folks, we don't have that opportunity. So to Dr. Pastor's question, we do elect folks, and we can unelect them, and much easier at the local level. I think where people become intimidated, and everyone I think is guilty of this, is we are so focused on the day-to-day quality of life things that we, there's been a great book called The Civil Society and the Great Society, I think is the title of it. And I forgot who wrote that, but the theory of it was that we are all, as constituents, we all expect someone else to manage the issue. So if it's a quality of life issue, the city is going to take care of it. If it's beyond that, the state will take care of it, or the federal government, or someone else. And I really appreciate what you said about the relationship building skills that we have as social workers. I think that is so critical to having not just students, but to us, to having us be able to connect and say, in this particular meeting that I attended, the town hall, the first person got up in the middle of the meeting and said, I put on my pants the same way that you do. So what makes you feel that we as unhoused people don't have a voice in this election? And that was so powerful for me. It really resonated with me. Absolutely. We are all very similar. And I think the dynamic, as we learn about the political processes and the way in which systems work, that's also another great tool that social workers have, is to do system busting, that students and everyone feels less intimidated and more inclined to really go in and make a change and effectuate change, So I think, at least for me, and I heard you echoing this, Dr. Manalo, for students, for us as general lay people, and for many of us, hopefully in this webinar, that are activists, I don't think we can be social workers without having that activism name attached to us. I think, understanding political context and historical context, and really using those two opportunities as a way to connect to people is important. And those quality of life issues can only change when we do that. I think your point of building relationships is that's how things change. We think of the great people in our society and our history that have effectuated change. Yes, they may have been one singular person, but their ability to bring together coalitions of people is what really effectuaid change.
Right. I agree with you wholeheartedly. And I think, just to add to your response, Nick, is that in terms of engaging folks, in relationship in their local government, and that is, I'm seeing this, a lot of this lately, especially amongst my students, that, we come in with a preconceived notion of what politics is, and we're trying to, and we're fitting ourselves into what we think that mold is. Mm-hmm. I think we need to approach it as social workers first, right? That's why I mentioned the importance of relationships. We should move, when students, I'm doing this assignment in one of my classes, my undergraduate student classes this semester. And now that it's getting to the part where they have to meet with people, now they're getting all anxious about, oh my gosh, I got to meet with someone. What do I say? What do I do? What do I do? I don't know. I'm so intimidated, right? And I say to them, I just want you to go in and make and establish a relationship with your elected official. That's it. I don't want you. Yes, you have issues that I know you want to talk about, right? But I don't want to turn it into, oh, I'm here to talk to you about these things that I've done research on for my paper, right? Because that's not creating a relationship, right? I want them to have the experience of actually being a professional and interacting with another person who just happens to be an elected official, but in a professional manner. So I say, okay, if you want to talk to meet your elected official, you don't have to be there to lobby, right? Because that's what we learn. Like if we meet with elected officials, we're there to lobby them about something, right? Because that's all we were taught. We were not taught how to actually create relationships with people who are elected officials, or how to create relationships with people who are staff members, right? Like we know how to create relationships with people that are our clients, right? But the skills that we apply are similar, right? Whether you're creating your relationship with your client or you're creating the relationship with the city manager of your city, or the elected city council member, or the county supervisor, or the county supervisor's deputy on children's services, right? It's applying those same relationship building skills that we are very accustomed to and expertise, and developed an expertise in that area. So we need to lead with our strengths, which is our relationships, right? And so people are intimidated, as I mentioned earlier. I know you were shaking your head, Nick. People are intimidated because they don't know what it's like. It's just like when I had my first client and I was intimidated to meet with my client the first time, but at some point I had to jump into that room, open the door, and sit down and meet with my client. So, I don't know how much hand-holding we can do to get people to meet with their elected officials, but I'll do it if I have to. But at some point we need to learn as much as we can about the process and familiarize people with the process. And then at some point you're going to have to go in and have that meeting. And I'm telling you that my students always come back, and what do they say? Oh my God, she was so nice, or he was so nice, or he listened to me. Well, of course. You know why? Because you live there and you're a voter. Why wouldn't that elected official listen to you? That's what I say to my students. If my resident called me and said, I want to meet with you because I want to talk about something, I would meet them. Why? Because they're a voter. That's your card, right, to get in. And you may not be a voter, right? We know some of our clients don't vote. They're not able to vote. They're not able to register. Some people are not registered. Some people don't vote. Doesn't matter. They're not going to look you up and say, oh, you didn't vote last time. I'm not going to talk to you. They're not going to do that. They're going to say, hey, you live in my city. You're a potential voter. I'm going to meet with you. And guess what? If you have more people show up, you've more of a chance they'll show up, right? So I think that those of us who are teaching policy can really do a lot through these assignments to manage students' anxiety about being intimidated about these things, because there is nothing to be intimidated about. As a matter of fact, I tell my students, you know more about social work as a student than the person that you're going to meet with, unless they're a social worker, right? Because I haven't met that many social workers in local government. And so they don't know, they know as much as the general public does about the issues that we care about, whether it's homelessness and unsheltered people, whether it's about addiction and abuse, whether it's about intimate partner violence, whether it's about, or any of the issues, child abuse and neglect, that we work with as social workers. By being a student or a professional social worker, you are the expert. So there is really no reason for you to be intimidated, because you know more about the issues that we're concerned about. You're all experts in that area. And the elected officials and staff that you're talking to are not. They are not. All right. They know a lot. They know a little about a lot of things, because when you're an elected official or staff, you have to know a little about a lot of different things. But they're not as expertise. They don't have the expertise that you do in the areas that you've chosen to practice in as social workers. Yeah, absolutely. And Stephanie, thank you. I wanted, you mentioned earlier about running for office. Again, when someone says to me, I want to run for office, what I tell students or other professionals, I say, approach it as a social worker. It's about relationships first. I lost my first two elections. For city council, and I won on the third try. Right? But what I learned between my first loss and second loss to the third time when I actually won, what I learned in between that time was the importance of relationships. And I'm thinking I should have known that, right? It's about going out and interacting with groups of people who are going to vote, right? Or that you're going to get them to register to vote, and developing a trust with those people, right? Because the normal way we do it in elections is you put out a bunch of flyers and material, and you hope that people will like you enough based on your picture and your issues and all that stuff that they will vote for you. That's how everybody does it. And I submit to you, yes, that is the way to get elected if you want to do it that way. But again, if you want to lead as a social worker, you're not going to rely on those mailers to create your relationship. You're not going to rely on emails or social media to create your relationship. You're actually going to go out into the community and build your base of support one relationship at a time, because that's what we do as social workers. So through these assignments, I hope that you be able to provide your students those opportunities to create those relationships, and for those of you who are already working in the field, that you have some ideas on how you yourself can get engaged. So let's see, were there any other question here, Nick, that you think that we should address? Or any in the Q&A?
I think, sorry to jump in. I think Dr. Alenkin did such a fabulous, I'm so impressed with your multitasking.
Oh,
I have to say.
there's two of me here. That's fine.
I was thinking there must have been some trick. You have a doppelganger next to you. But I actually wanted to ask, are there any responses that you typed in, Doctor, that you'd want to lift up for the recording, since we're going to be sharing the recording? There might be some that you want to verbally share that are interesting.
There's plenty of, and I kind of took it upon myself. I hope that was okay to kind of respond.
Oh yes, totally okay. Yeah, no, your responses are great.
I think there's I'm going to put on my research hat on now. So there's a few themes that have emerged here, kind of thinking about it qualitatively here. So a lot of what people talked about is how to help people, students or whoever, connect to making the issues or problems that they feel are important, how to have them connect to elected folks and elected officials, right? How do we connect as Dr. Manalo has done so well, how do we connect the micro skill sets to the macro skill sets? And I think part of Dr. Manalo has done a really good job of talking about, I think, the critical area of relationships. What I wanted to add to that is what I had said earlier. The social problems that we face are not someone else's social problems. They are really our own. And, this has been so reinforced with everything that's happening. The larger our world becomes, the more smaller it gets in terms of the effects that issues have across the world on us. So I think to dispel the misnomer that if I'm experiencing an issue, that it's only my issue. I think that's really important to think of it as that it's affecting not just myself, but so many other people. So I think to help students connect to whatever their social issues are, to help them, the way that I do that is that I ask them, and I hope Dr. Manalo can attest to this, you know, policymakers, elected officials, they react not just to votes, but they react to emotion. So if it's personally, and it goes back to his ideas around social relationships, if it has an effect on me personally, then I'm going to try to effectuate some change. So poverty, you know, well, I don't have to worry about poverty because I have a lot of money coming in. Okay. Well, you know, that might be true, but we know that when we have impoverished communities and we have, you know, people that aren't able to have equitable wage, that it impacts healthcare service delivery, it impacts mental health service delivery, it impacts transportation, it impacts, I mean, just environmental. So everything is really connected together. So I think elected officials want to hear that those social problems are also their own. And the way to do that is to connect to them emotionally. And as Dr. Manalo said so well, is that relationship really cuts through a lot of the power that they have, right? That it isn't about, this is just my issue or my problem. Because if we do that, then it's real easy to say someone else is going to take care of it, right? But so connecting, so that's one theme. The other theme that has emerged from what I'm seeing here is, you know, people are asking in terms of not just how do we connect social issues and problems, but a lot of folks are asking in terms of connecting through and understanding the systems that are in place. So my tip is, and Dr. Manalo can vouch for this, every person is accountable to someone else. Every person has a boss. And along with that, every person has someone that is very closely aligned to them. So the gatekeepers for most elected officials are their schedulers or their chief of staff. So those folks are if you can't reach the elected official, those folks are the ones that you want to use your relationship skills with and connections to. You know, schedulers are so important. You know, it's easy for an elected person to say, I don't have time, when the scheduler knows that they do have time, and the scheduler can make that time for you. You know, so I would say those two things are kind of the themes that I've been seeing. I know Dr. Pastor has her hand up, so go ahead, Dr. Pastor.
Oh, sorry. Did you? I thought somebody told me to unmute.
Oh, there. Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, yes. I wondered if you wanted to share the idea about the turtle. Yes.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I think it's a great idea. Yeah, go ahead, please.
Yeah. So hi everybody, and the two of you are just our heroes. You are wonderful, and Deborah, thank you for pulling it all together. So my students over the years, we have talked about having a mascot. We use the turtle as our mascot. I have dozens of them that have been brought to me over the years. And we say that we're like turtles because we are soft on the inside, we are tough on the outside. Our progress is usually really slow, but we only make it when we come out of our shell and stick our necks out. And that is a way to do it. So if any of you, next time we do part 2, I have a turtle that dances to Funky Town. And it really is all about being able to, when I start my class, I just walk in and start the turtle dancing. And I say, get everybody, get up and dance. And they look at me like, what, get up and dance 9 in the morning? So, well, why aren't you doing that? Well, I'll do it because you're going to give me a grade and I want to get a good grade. Others pretend they didn't hear it. But we really talk about the 30 seconds we can't come out of our comfort zone when look at what we're asking others to do. So I also put in the chat, go back to Dr. You will remember, both of you, Dr. Dennis Alibi and his work on strength-based language and the strength-based approach. And he said, we really have to reframe. So we can go from problem solving to solution seeking. We can go from obstacle to opportunity. And sometimes that is a way of making it inspiring and a little less threatening. So thank you, and look forward to part 2. All of us, we're in it together.
Thanks, Eileen. And I wanted to follow up on what you said about the kind of the strength-based approach and the language that we use. And you know, when the problem with the way that we all, you know, have been taught about the local government system, as I mentioned earlier, is that you complain when there's something is wrong. But when you complain that there's something wrong, then the responsibility is on the elected official to try to figure out what the solution is. And you might not like that solution, right? If I'm not a social worker and you're asking me to do something about the fact that there are homeless and unsheltered people walking around the city, you might not like the fact that my solution is to go around in a van, load them all up and all their belongings and ship them to Ventura County. You might not like that solution, but you complained about it, and because I'm the elected official, that was my solution. So what Eileen says, I think, is very pertinent to this discussion, and that is, if you're going to be creating these relationships with your elected officials, right, you're going, and eventually at the point in time when you feel like that the elected official through your relationship is open now to seek a change in addressing or want to prioritize addressing a solution in your city, and you have a solution ready, it's much easier for them to take a solution and run with it than it is for you to say, there's a problem, do something about it, I'm going to wait right here and see what you come up with. Right? Because then we're just playing into that whole, you know, I'm only going to do something when I don't like what you're doing and I want to complain about it, right? So it's about being proactive, positive, solutions oriented. And I'll also throw one more thing in there, because I've seen this so often you don't even know. But people think that if you go to a council meeting or you're talking to an elected official, that it's okay to insult them and argue with them as a way to get something done. You should all be feeling, be going, oh my God, I can't believe people do that. But they do. I wouldn't expect social workers to do that, although I've seen social workers do it, believe me. You cannot, you know, that flies against what we believe and what we've been taught in terms of how you create relationships with people. You cannot expect another human being, whether they're an elected official or a staff member or your supervisor or anyone else in authority, to listen to anything you have to say if you are disrespectful and insulting them. And I'm telling you, I have been through 12 years of people coming to a city council meeting and insulting me. And that is not the way. If you want to be an effective social worker in this space or in any government space, you have to be able to create good relationships and engage with our superpower, which is creating good relationships, right? Not by what everybody says we should be doing, which is going to a city council meeting and screaming and yelling and being disrespectful and saying, how dare you do this? How dare you do that? You're not thinking about this, you know, all this stuff, okay? So yeah, let's lead with our strengths. Let's lead with our superpowers as social workers. And I'm looking forward to our continued discussion on these areas, Dr. Alenkin. I'm glad you signed me up for part 2. I'm with you, buddy. We have to make sure it's okay with Deborah and the planning group. But
I'm in.
Victor volunteers me for things, and I repay him. No, but I think that as the interest here, as we've seen, I think there's certainly a lot that's happening, and a lot can be shared. I appreciate just the invitation. This symposium and the consortium is great. This is great. This is what advances the work we do. It's so vital to the work we do. So, absolutely.
Yes. So, Deborah, I think we're at the end of our time. Yes.
We are.
Oh, how sad.
I know, I could hang out with you all weekend long. Well, I just want to share a heartfelt thank you to Dr. Alenkin, Dr. Manalo, and Lucia. Thank you for your support. Thank you all for joining us. This was such a wonderful event, and we'll sign you all up, those who sent their emails, and watch out for the recording. You're welcome to share it with anybody you'd like. And we'll hopefully see you all at the next consortium meeting. Everybody have a great weekend and enjoy the rest of your social work month. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it. Thanks for the great questions.
Bye.